8 men to a tent. Months on campaign. No wives, no privacy. So how did Roman soldiers deal with the lack of sex? The rules said virtue. The frontier said something else. Paydays in garrison towns, taverns that never wrote receipts. Friends who shared more than rations, and punishments that depended on who wore the rank. Letters hint at jealousy and hush-hush favors. Camp jokes point one way, the law codes point another. Was it discipline denial or quiet arrangements everyone knew not to name? We'll walk the camp street and follow the clues, no spoilers. Just the logic of how men actually lived under the eagle. Comment the exact time you're watching Dawn Drill or Midnight Watch. If this pulled you in, tap like so, the next chapter marches a little farther. You sign your name to Rome's most powerful army, and your love life is the first casualty. No flowers, no dates, not even a legal wife. The Legion may promise glory land and citizenship, but what it really recruits is your obedience. You trade kisses for command drills, privacy for discipline, and the right to marry for 25 years of celibate service, at least on paper. The rule comes from Emperor Augustus, the same man who gave Rome its golden age and himself a reputation for moral policing. He didn't just want strong soldiers, he wanted them morally convenient. Marriage, he claimed, distracted the ranks. A wife meant to house children expenses and reasons to question suicidal orders. So Augustus made a decree no legionary shall marry while in service. Simple, efficient, cruel. You stand in line at enlistment, one hand raised, the other clutching a wax tablet. The officer reading the oath doesn't mention this part aloud. It's in the fine print buried under the pay scale and ration terms. The logic feels strangely familiar. The empire says it's for your own good. Like a modern company banning relationships to avoid conflicts of interest, Rome wanted its legions focused, loyal, and unattached. At first you imagine you can handle it. After all, you're 20 in peak condition, surrounded by thousands of men in the same boat. The army even feeds you, pays you, and clothes you roughly but reliably. The problem is the years. 25 of them. No marriage, no official family, no recognized heirs. If you slip, the law calls it misconduct. If you get caught with a local girl, it's fraternization with civilians. The penalties vary from fines to flogging to quiet reassignment to some remote outpost. Roman discipline didn't play games. A soldier's life was a machine made of rules and routine. You eat, drill, build, march, and fight on command. Emotions are things you pack into the same bag as your sandals, useful only when ordered. But soldiers are still human, and repression leaks through the cracks. At night, when the fires die, and the tents rustle with small talk, you hear the jokes, half true, half desperate. The only women allowed in camp, someone mutters, are the goddesses on our coins. Another answers, and they're cold company. Laughter rolls through the ranks, but there's a kind of ache under it. That's the irony. Rome built its armies on discipline, but it kept them loyal through vice. If love was forbidden, desire was merely redirected. The quartermaster knew which taverns were safe. The centurion knew which merchants supplied more than grain. Officially, the law said no wives. Unofficially, the empire winked and said, just be discreet. You soon realized the ban wasn't moral purity, it was logistics. The army moved constantly. Marching legions could cover 20 miles a day. Dragging families along would turn them into caravans. Children slowed columns, wives complicated command structures. The generals wanted mobile armies, not domestic dramas. Rome's greatness, in its eyes, depended on soldiers who could burn bridges literally and emotionally. Still, the ban didn't stop affection. It only made it resourceful. Some soldiers kept secret companions near their forts, women who cooked, mended, or followed the army's route unofficially. Others formed quiet arrangements with locals, promising support without paperwork. The law didn't recognize these unions, but human nature did. When soldiers died hidden, partners sometimes appeared clutching rings or babies that the empire refused to name legitimate. The historian Tacitus once wrote that the army's strength lay in its discipline. What he didn't add is that discipline was always at war with loneliness. A soldier in the Alps wrote on a wax tablet that he missed home more than bread. Another scrawled graffiti at Vindolanda asking a friend to send a girl, any girl, decent or not. You can almost hear the exhaustion behind the humor. Modern psychologists might call it suppressed intimacy fatigue. The Romans just called it the cost of honor. To them, the perfect soldier was both a weapon and a monk, a man who gave his body to the state and denied it to everyone else. And Rome rewarded that denial. When veterans retired, they finally gained what they'd been denied: land. Legal wives and children who could inherit citizenship. For some, that was the dream that kept them marching. The promise that deprivation would one day turn into domestic peace. You imagine the first night of rest after 2 decades of conquest. The armor off. The orders stopped. Maybe finally a home that isn't shaped like a tent. But for now, you're still in line, a recruit with a regulation haircut, a wax tablet full of rules, and a heart that belongs to the empire. Somewhere in the camp, a bugle calls for drill, and every thought of love vanishes under the sound of discipline. When dawn breaks over the camp, you hear more than the clang of shields. You hear the quieter hum of the people who aren't supposed to exist. Women moving between tents, children chasing chickens, merchants unloading baskets of figs and wine. They're not soldiers, not citizens of the Legion, but they belong here all the same. That's the secret Rome never wrote in marble. Every army built its own shadow village. Beyond the fort walls lies the Cenabi, the civilian sprawl that follows the Legion like an unofficial echo. It's half marketplace, half family camp, and entirely illegal in the eyes of strict regulation. Yet every commander knows life would collapse without it. Who mends tunics? Who bakes bread? Who soothes the nerves of men who've been marching through mud for months? The army doesn't supply comfort, it contracts it out. You walk through the stalls, blacksmiths hammering horseshoes, barbers with makeshift mirrors, women selling bread so fresh it makes the soldiers stop mid-step. A few wear simple tunics, others finer robes that speak of long hours spent earning them. Some are wives, in everything but law partners of soldiers, who share pay chores and worries, but not legal recognition. The Romans called them concubinae, though most modern historians prefer the phrase camp followers. The truth is less polite and more human. The soldiers know them by name. Livia, who sews uniforms faster than the supply corps. Drusilla, whose laugh carries across the tents at night. Julia, who manages a stall by day and a household by night. You can spot who's paired with whom without asking. There's a shared look, a rhythm of work and care that doesn't need ceremony to make it real. Children dart between the tents, 2 miniature versions of their fathers, hair dark, eyes curious. Technically, they're illegitimate, no citizen father until discharge, but the army doesn't chase them away. When men march out to campaign, the Cenabi pack up and follow wagons rattling behind the eagle standards like a parallel civilization. It's chaotic, dusty, and deeply alive. Commanders tolerate it for practical reasons. A soldier who knows someone waits for him fights harder. A camp with bakers and washers runs smoother than one without. Even Emperor Hadrian no romantic quietly allowed contubernales, unofficial wives, who lived in assigned huts near fort walls. Better an orderly love than a secret one, an officer once quipped. It was the closest thing to compassion Roman policy ever managed. Some relationships blur the line between affection and survival. A laundress might become a companion out of necessity, a guarantee of steady work food and a tent safe from harassment. For soldiers, attachment can be protection too. A woman's tent offers shelter from gambling debts, fights, or boredom that leads to punishment. It's not always love, but it's something warmer than regulation. Occasionally, the empire catches up to its own hypocrisy. During the Flavian dynasty, inscriptions appear describing women as uxor militis, soldier's wife, even before the marriage ban was formally lifted. Archaeologists have found tombstones carved with names of these quiet partners, to Julia, beloved of Marcus the centurion. The law pretended they didn't exist, but stone disagreed. And the soldiers wrote too. At Vindolanda, a Roman fort in northern Britain, a fragment of a letter survives from a woman named Claudia Severa, inviting her friend Sulpicia Lepidina to a birthday party. The ink is delicate, the Latin elegant, the emotion unmistakably familiar. She misses her friend, she hopes she'll come. Historians call it the earliest known writing by a Roman woman in Britain. You can call it proof that warmth survived even this far north of the empire's heart. Walking back through the camp, you catch snippets of conversation. A legionary complains that his partner's bread burned. Another boasts that his boy can already lift a shield. These aren't barrack stories, they're domestic ones. The tent flaps may be made of leather, but inside them, life sounds like any neighborhood anywhere. Small grievances, laughter, the smell of stew. And yet every soldier knows it's temporary. When the horn blows for deployment, the canabai empties like a theater after curtain. Women pack the bread ovens, children wave from wagons, and the road swallows them all. Maybe they'll meet again at the next fort, maybe not. A soldier's love story ends as quickly as a campaign. No promises, no paperwork, no inheritance. The empire thrives on this transience. Soldiers belong to the eagle. Families belong to fortune. You start to understand how Rome could rule the world. It found a way to keep hearts tethered, just enough to hold them, but not enough to slow them down. Every embrace is a borrowed luxury paid for by the next march. You return to the barracks at dusk, past the cooking fires and the laughter that fades behind you. The regulations still hang over everything, like smoke, but somewhere out there in a tent stitched from disobedience and hope. Someone is mending a soldier's tunic by lamplight, humming the same tune the legions will hum on the road tomorrow. By payday, the air around camp thickens with anticipation, and not just for the clink of coins. The line at the aerarium, the pay chest, hums with laughter and half-jokes about where those denarii will vanish before dawn. You already know the pattern: first wine, then dice, then women. The Roman army could conquer a continent, but not its own appetites. You count your pay 13 years before you even see a pension and feel its weight, both metallic and moral. Every legionary earns around 225 denarii a year under Augustus, more under Domitian. But after deductions for food, boots, and uniforms, not much remains. Still, it's enough to buy a night of forgetting. And the city, or whatever frontier settlement you're posted to, knows it. Follow the laughter beyond the fort wall, and you find it easily: taverns, bathhouses, and the unmistakable glow of oil lamps above curtained doorways. The Romans had a word for these districts: lupanaria. Literally wolf houses, because the women who worked there were called lupe, she-wolves, for how they called to customers in the street. The name says more about Roman men's imagination than about the women themselves. Inside the scene is equal parts theater and commerce. Walls painted with cheap frescoes of cupids or racing chariots. A table with clay cups that rarely see water. A keeper perched near the entrance with a wax tablet listing prices. A soldier's pay might buy him wine bread and a brief moment of someone's attention. Roman pragmatism extends even here, transactions recorded, taxes collected. No illusions encouraged. You might imagine chaos, but the empire actually regulated pleasure. Brothels paid state fees. Owners kept registers. In some towns, prostitutes even had licenses stamped with their names and physical descriptions, a bureaucratic measure that made sin taxable. The moralists scolded, but the accountants smiled. As long as order was maintained, Rome saw no scandal in a soldier spending part of his wage in a licensed establishment. What it feared was disorder fights, unpaid debts, disease outbreaks. The army didn't condemn the act so much as the distraction. Commanders quietly preferred the lupanaria to unregulated affairs. A few coins in a controlled setting caused less trouble than jealous husbands or secret pregnancies near the fort. Better spend an hour than lose a week in the stocks, one centurion mutters, and no one disagrees. The state's hypocrisy was almost elegant private virtue, public tolerance. Of course, not every encounter came from coin. Taverns, blurred lines, wine cellars, who offered conversation, innkeepers' daughters, who liked soldiers for reasons other than money. The Roman historian Juvenal joked that even the gods in the pantheon had their share of innkeepers' sons. You can almost hear the sarcasm echoing across centuries. For all their laws about purity, the Romans were professionals at negotiation. Still, indulgence had its hierarchy. Officers could afford discretion. Private dinners, educated courtesans, carefully managed liaisons that looked respectable. Ordinary soldiers made do with cheaper distractions. Archaeologists have found graffiti from Pompey's barracks that reads like unfiltered humor. Crude jokes, names carved with affection, or mockery price tags, scribbled like advertising. One inscription, near a tavern wall, simply reads, "Felix hic bene futuit." Felix had a good time here. The ancient equivalent of, "I was here," signed with satisfaction. But desire in Rome came with double standards, sharper than any sword. A respectable Roman man could visit a prostitute or take a concubine without shame. But if he allowed himself to be emotionally entangled, that looked weak. Self-control, not chastity, was the measure of virtue. So you laugh along with the rest, pretending it's all amusement, because sentiment belongs to poets, not soldiers. Money flows back into the system like blood to a heart. The tavern owners bribe quartermasters, who then look the other way. When soldiers stumble back after curfew, merchants sell trinkets and perfumes, imported from Syria or Egypt, exotic scents that fill air thick with sweat and laughter. Somewhere nearby, musicians play a tune older than the empire itself. And for a few hours, the frontier feels like Rome, again loud, indulgent, alive. Yet even here rules hover. The moralists back home like Seneca and Musonius Rufus preach that restraint builds character, that lust erodes courage. The irony, most of them never marched a mile in armor or slept in a tent for months without comfort. So soldiers ignore their letters and trust what's real. Warmth, food, touch, laughter. When morning returns, the fort gate swallows them again. The prefect checks attendants' faces, pale from wine and sleep deprivation, but the drills resume. The empire runs on this rhythm, discipline by day, indulgence by night. Balance restored at sunrise. You realize Rome didn't remove temptation. It simply priced it, taxed it, and filed it under logistics. As you polish your armor and shake the dust off your sandals, you can almost hear the city still buzzing behind you. The smell of wine clings to your cloak, the echo of laughter to your thoughts. But no one speaks of it aloud. By midday, the army is once again marble-faced, orderly, mechanical. You remember the saying carved on a tavern wall in Gaul: life is short, the road is long. For the Roman soldier, that wasn't philosophy, it was routine. The Roman army could punish theft with crucifixion, But what it really feared was love getting complicated. Desire wasn't outlawed. Attachment was. And nowhere did that rule twist tighter than in the blurred lines between concubines, slaves, and the strange gray zone Rome called domestic loyalty. Back in the barracks, every man knows that the word concubina carries both comfort and caution. She's not a wife, you aren't allowed one. But she's not a stranger either. She cooks your food, washes your tunic, and sometimes stays long enough that the camp starts treating her like family. Her children might even have your eye. But by Roman law, they belong to no one but her. The army calls her presence irregular, but she's the most regular part of your day. Rome prided itself on order. Everything had to fit a category. Citizen or non-citizen soldier, or civilian wife or slave. Concubines made the legal system nervous because they broke the neat lines. Some were freed women, others camp followers who simply stayed. In wealthier households back in Rome, concubinage could be respectable, an arrangement recognized by social custom, even if not by legal marriage. Among soldiers, it was survival, wrapped in affection. You've seen both kinds. One centurion keeps a former slave as his concubine, a quiet woman named Nisa, who can quote lines from Virgil better than her master. Another soldier brags that his partner brews stronger wine than any tavern girl. Both women live in the shadow of a system that classifies them as property. Yet the men talk about them like companions. That tension, the illusion of partnership built on inequality, is one of Rome's oldest hypocrisies. Slavery underpinned the empire so completely that even affection had a price tag. In wealthy villas, masters wrote poems about their slave lovers as if power could be romantic. Ovid, ever the troublemaker, filled his verses with advice on how to charm a maid without offending her owner. Advice that's hard to read now without wincing. In the army, things were rougher, but just as morally tangled. When soldiers stationed on the frontier took slaves after campaigns, some became servants, others became companions. The state didn't ask questions as long as discipline held. Ethics blurred further when religion entered the tent. The cult of Mithras, popular among soldiers, prized self-control and masculine brotherhood, teaching that desire must be mastered. But mastered didn't mean denied. It meant directed. A man was expected to dominate his passions, not erase them. As long as he remained the active partner, his reputation stayed clean. Roman morality cared less about gender and more about power. Losing control emotionally or physically was the real disgrace. You begin to notice how language itself polices behavior. A Roman man could say he used a slave without scandal, but to say he loved her would sound weak. Emotional vulnerability was a foreign dialect. The Stoics preached restraint. The law enforced hierarchy. The entire empire ran on the assumption that people came in ranks, and affection was never meant to cross them. Still, human nature doesn't take orders. Archaeologists keep finding tomb inscriptions that quietly defy the rules. One from Carnuntum reads, "To Julia, my faithful companion, who shared my tent and my heart." Another from Mainz honors Aurelia, beloved of her soldier. These are acts of rebellion carved in limestone, soft revolutions disguised as epitaphs. Imagine what it must have felt like for the women. To live beside a man who could not acknowledge you in public, whose death could erase your name from memory. To wash his armor every night, knowing that in the eyes of the empire, you were an object among his gear. Yet somehow these women built entire communities outside the fort, trading, raising children, forming friendships with each other. The shadow society beneath the legion's march might have been the truest version of Roman domestic life, only without the paperwork. And it wasn't just men and women who tangled with rules. Power dynamics turned every relationship into calculation. Even among soldiers, rank shaped what you could say or feel. A centurion might keep a boy servant without scandal, but a ranker caught in the same act risked flogging. The dividing line was never morality, it was visibility. The empire tolerated anything as long as it didn't threaten the illusion of order. You begin to understand that Rome's genius wasn't just in conquering land, it was in controlling categories. Every form of affection had to be labeled ranked or rationalized. Love could exist, but only as long as it stayed obedient. A soldier might sneak tenderness into the cracks of law, but he'd never be free to name it aloud. Some evenings, when the campfire burns low, you catch glimpses of the truth the laws tried to bury two figures sharing bread. A child playing in the dust, laughter that sounds too genuine to be regulation. The army's scrolls may forbid marriage, but the heart doesn't sign decrees. It just beats quietly in the dark, waiting for the next trumpet to drown it out. When night falls and the camp settles, discipline doesn't end, it just changes costume. The torches glow low, the tents whisper, and the lines between camaraderie and curiosity blur. Rome's army didn't ban same-sex relations, it merely demanded they happen in the right direction. For a civilization obsessed with hierarchy, even desire came with a rank system. Roman morality never asked who you loved, it asked who played which role. A free-born Roman man could do nearly anything, as long as he stayed dominant. To be the active partner commanding assertive and control was to remain manly. To be passive, receptive, emotional, that in Rome's vocabulary risked humiliation. They didn't call it homosexuality. They called it status loss. In the barracks, that logic created a strange equilibrium. The legions were all male environments, thousands of men living together for years, sharing tense drills and silence between campaigns. The official law, Lex Scantinia, condemned abuse of freeborn males, but in practice, it mostly protected the social order, not the moral one. Soldiers could face punishment for violating hierarchy, not for desire itself. In a world where everything revolved around dominance, affection became another arena for proving control. The humor reflected it. Graffiti scratched into barracks walls and bathhouse tiles reads like a combination of teasing and confession. Secundus loves Lucius. One inscription declares the heart drawn with clumsy lines. Another, half erased, adds, Lucius loves wine more. Some are jokes, others look more sincere, but none sound particularly scandalized. Among soldiers, teasing was survival. If you couldn't joke about it, you couldn't live with it. Philosophers and poets mirrored the same contradictions. Martial, the quick-tongued satirist of Rome, filled his epigrams with winks at male lovers while mocking men who forgot their station. Juvenal sneered at senators who indulged openly, but wrote with envy more than outrage. Even the emperor, Hadrian, commander of legions and builder of walls, kept his love for the youth Antinous so publicly that statues of the boy still dot the empire's ruins. The army didn't collapse under scandal. It saluted, built another fort, and moved on. Inside the camps, these unwritten codes lived comfortably beside strict order. Senior soldiers might keep younger auxiliaries as companions, sometimes romantic, sometimes purely hierarchical. It's easy to condemn now, but the Romans saw it as another layer of mentorship, warped by power. Yes, but normalized by routine. The army taught obedience through intimacy, and intimacy through obedience. Every relationship echoed the chain of command. You watch a group of recruits cleaning weapons by torchlight, their laughter easy, their teasing practiced. The talk swings between jokes about girls in nearby villages and friendly mock threats of who snores loudest. Yet underneath it, you feel a closeness that only hardship breeds. When every battle might be your last, the man beside you becomes more than a comrade. He's the only world that still makes sense. If affection grows from that, the Empire doesn't ask questions, as long as it doesn't challenge discipline. In this environment, the line between affection and survival often disappears. When you rely on another man to guard your back in a night ambush or drag you bleeding from a trench, something deeper than camaraderie takes root. The army called it contubernium, sharing a tent, but the word carried emotional weight. Two men who had served together for years might call each other contubernales, a term that could also describe a household couple. Archaeologists have even found tombstones erected by one soldier for another, inscriptions that read, "Less like duty and more like love." The Stoic philosophers said self-control was a soldier's highest virtue. But even they admitted that comradeship, amicitia, was sacred. Seneca wrote that a true friend is another self. He probably didn't mean it literally, but in the camp that phrase could sound like permission. To love your brother in arms was not vice, if it made you fight harder, endure longer, or die less afraid. That's the paradox of Rome: public cruelty, private tenderness. The same civilization that crushed rebellions with crucifixions built its legions on emotional dependency. In the smoke of battle, distinctions dissolved. No one cared who loved whom when the javelin started flying. And afterward, when the dead were counted and the survivors staggered back to camp, grief was the one indulgence no general ever banned. You sit by the fire watching two veterans share bread from the same ration, their movements wordless, perfectly synchronized. There's nothing to label, nothing to report, just the quiet understanding that in a life where tomorrow's dawn isn't guaranteed, connection of any kind is an act of defiance. Rome's laws could march across continents, but the human heart stayed stubbornly ungoverned. And somewhere far away, perhaps in a senator's villa, a moralist dips his quill in ink and writes another essay about virtue. Out here the legions live, a truth simpler and older than law companionship, however. It's found keeps men alive. The sun rises red over the parade ground, the kind of color that looks like an omen, even when you know better. A centurion squints at it and mutters, "Mars is watching." He's only half joking. Before every battle, the Roman soldier was told to control not just his sword, but his urges. Desire, the priests said, could weaken a man faster than any wound. In the Roman mind, self-control wasn't only virtue, it was strategy. Before campaigns, soldiers were ordered to abstain from wine, gambling, and sex for days, sometimes weeks. Not because the army suddenly found morality, it feared distraction. Lust made men lazy, superstition claimed, and the gods of war demanded focus. Mars, stern and bloodthirsty, was said to favor men whose bodies were sharp, their minds sharper and their passions locked away like unpolished armor. It wasn't just belief, it was ritual. Before marching, you'd wash in cold water, rub oil on your arms, and fast until sundown. Commanders inspected every detail of your gear and your posture, but also your habits. A soldier who slipped into indulgence before battle risked bad luck for the whole unit. There are stories, half legend, half warning, of officers who discovered a soldier sneaking into a lover's tent the night before combat and forcing him to fight in the front rank the next day. "Let Venus protect you now," they'd sneer. Superstition filled the spaces where logic couldn't reach. Some men tied small phallic amulets under their tunics, not for lust, but for luck. The Romans believed the image of fertility could ward off envy and evil. A crude charm against impotence became a charm against death. Soldiers rubbed these talismans before battle, the way modern athletes tap helmets or cross themselves, rituals of control in a life where almost nothing could be controlled. Then there were the cults. Mithras, Jupiter, Dolichaeus, Mars, Fortuna, all promise strength through purity. The Mithraic temples carved into rock caves under forts carried imagery of bulls, swords, and cosmic order. To be initiated meant to swear secrecy and endurance to become part of a brotherhood that renounced softness. The more you suffered, the closer you got to salvation. For a soldier, that was theology and therapy rolled into one. You've probably heard the phrase, keep your head in the game. The Romans invented it. They even had a saying, Venus weakens Mars. To them, love and war were rival deities constantly tugging at the same mortal souls. The poet Propertius warned young men that women drained courage from warriors. Livy wrote about generals who forbade wives and courtesans from following the army, claiming no man can serve two masters. Yet history proves the ban never quite worked. You can legislate behavior, but not biology. Some commanders took abstinence seriously. Scipio Africanus, the man who beat Hannibal famously, returned a captured maiden untouched, saying he would rather conquer lust than Carthage. His soldiers turned it into a campfire legend. Proof that even the mightiest Roman knew the battle within was the hardest to win. But others rolled their eyes and poured more wine. Not everyone could afford sainthood. The balance between control and indulgence became its own kind of performance. A soldier could brag about self-restraint the same way he bragged about scars. I haven't touched wine in 3 months, one might say, to nods of respect. The next might wink, I haven't touched it alone. Humor softened the edge of hypocrisy. Everyone knew virtue was flexible in proportion to distance from command tents. The medics, too, had their say. Army doctors warned that excess drained vital heat, the same invisible energy that kept muscles strong and reflexes sharp. Weak soldiers fall twice. One medicus liked to preach wagging his stylus like a priest's finger. They didn't know about hormones or hydration, but they understood fatigue. Abstinence enforced or not often did make men sharper, at least until the next leave. Out on campaign, isolation became its own kind of purification. March long enough through snow or desert, and even longing grew tired. The body learned discipline the way it learned to carry armor, awkward at first, automatic later. You start to understand why Roman discipline lasted centuries. It wasn't just fear of punishment, it was the habit of control turned into religion. But not all faith was martial. In quieter moments, soldiers prayed to Venus too, asking not for indulgence, but for protection of the ones they'd left behind. Shrines to loved deities appeared near fort gates, offerings left beside Mars's altars, like a whispered apology. The army lived between those gods, blood and affection, blade and heart, hoping they wouldn't notice the contradiction. Somewhere in camp, a flute plays a slow tune before lights out. You can hear it through the tent walls, half lullaby, half lament. Maybe the player doesn't even realize it's a prayer, just a melody to fill the silence where desire once lived. The Romans didn't know about psychology, but they understood ritual. Control the body, they believed, and maybe the mind will follow. When the torches finally dim, the night feels cleaner, emptier. The smell of oil and sweat fades into the sound of distant guards swapping shifts. For now, everyone sleeps under the illusion that discipline has tamed everything that matters. But the truth hums just beneath the surface, because what Rome called purity was really just waiting with better posture. If Rome built its empire with discipline, it maintained it with humor. In a world of long marches and longer abstinence, laughter was medicine and sometimes confession in disguise. The Romans might not have invented dirty jokes, but they industrialized them. In the barracks, jokes work like armor. They dull embarrassment's shield against loneliness, and if delivered well, earn a reputation better than a medal. Every tent has its own comedian, the guy who can make even the centurion crack a grin while pretending not to. His punchlines come from the same topics soldiers have shared for millennia: bad food, worse weather, and the eternal mysteries of women. The graffiti on fortress walls reads like a time capsule of coping. At Vindolanda in northern Britain, one soldier scribbled, "I've lost my sandals, but not my spirit." Another carved, "Brothel ahead, march faster." You can picture the smirk behind it, a wink at the endless march toward both battle and distraction. Pompeii's surviving walls tell the same story. Crude sketches, names joined by hearts, tally marks of visits to taverns, and sarcastic digs at officers who couldn't hold their wine. Humor wasn't just rebellion, it was social glue. Rank and cruelty dissolve when the whole tent laughs together. A soldier might tease his friend about a crush, a failed flirtation, or a night spent sleeping in a puddle, and the laughter stitched the wound shut. It's strange how often the stories repeat themselves. Rome's empire was enormous, yet its soldiers all sound like modern co-workers on a night shift. Complaints, gossip, and sarcasm. Some things don't evolve because they don't need to. Letters kept the spirit alive, too. The wooden tablets found at Vindolanda aren't all love notes or orders. Some are banter. One soldier thanks a comrade for sending socks and underwear, adding, "You wouldn't believe the weather here." Another writes, "Please send more beer." Historians may study them as documents of supply logistics. But to anyone who's ever missed home, they read like postcards filled with weary affection. Every camp had unofficial storytellers, the men who could turn humiliation into legend. The one who fell in the river, the one caught snoring during watch, the one who mistook a superior's tent for his own after too much wine. These tales circulated faster than news, each retelling exaggerating the absurdity until everyone forgot who started it. Humor turned the brutal sameness of army life into folklore. Even commanders played along. Julius Caesar himself was known for tolerating soldier jokes at his expense, provided they stayed clever. During one campaign, when his troops mocked his thinning hair by wearing laurel crowns too low, he supposedly laughed and promised them extra rations for originality. To a Roman general, a joking legion was a loyal one. Better laughter than mutiny. You see the logic in it. Laughter releases pressure. It makes prohibitions livable. For every rule Rome enforced about purity or restraint, humor provided the loophole that kept sanity intact. Instead of fighting desire, they joked about it. Instead of grieving absence, they mocked it. It's not repression, it's recycling. Marching songs carried the same energy. Half prayer, half stand-up routine, they mixed boasts, mockery, and a healthy dose of filth disguised as rhythm. March faster, the wine grows colder, they'd chant, or our commander's speeches outlast the sun. Archaeologists still find fragments of these chants scratched on wax tablets, their melodies long lost, but their attitude intact. The closest modern comparison might be military memes' shared language that makes misery communal. Ancient soldiers didn't have phones, but they had styluses and the nearest wall. When you carve a joke into stone, it outlasts the empire that censored it. And maybe that was the point. Even Rome's philosophers who liked to frown at excess admitted humor's value. Seneca advised laughter as a form of resilience. He who laughs at life has already conquered it. The soldiers, it seems, took him literally. When boredom and loneliness threatened to rot morale, they met it with irony. A man without a wife could still flirt with fortune. A man without comfort could still mock discomfort. Some of the graffiti even border on tenderness. Come back safe. My brother reads one faint scrawl on a barracks beam in Dura Europos. The handwriting trembles as if carved in haste. It's not a joke, but it sits among jokes, a reminder that humor and love often share the same handwriting. Soldiers learned early that if you can't cry about it, you laugh instead. By the end of the day, when the lamps go out and only embers glow in the hearth, the camp hums with soft laughter. Someone tells a story about a Praetorian who kissed the wrong man in the dark. Someone else claims to have met a goddess in the bathhouse who stole his sandals. The chuckles ripple, echo fade. For a few minutes, everyone forgets the rules, the loneliness, and the distance between them and home. Humor, you realize, was Rome's most underrated survival tactic. Not courage, not discipline, but the ability to make absurdity bearable. The legions marched on full stomachs, sharp swords, and terrible jokes, and somehow that combination conquered the world. Morning drills bring their own brand of pain, march thrust, shield repeat. But the real danger lurks elsewhere. You can't fight what you can't see, and the Roman army's greatest invisible enemy didn't carry a sword. The legions could face barbarians without fear. But one night in the wrong bathhouse could fell half a cohort. Health for a Roman soldier was a daily gamble. The medics worried less about wounds and more about the diseases that crept through brothels, bathhouses, and river water. Rome, with all its engineering genius, had public sanitation that modern historians still admire: aqueducts, sewers, latrines. But its understanding of infection stopped somewhere between "the gods are angry" and "try wine and prayers." The average legionary learned fast discipline could keep you alive in battle. But hygiene decided whether you'd live long enough to enjoy your pay. You start to notice the rituals. Soldiers wash hands with vinegar, rub oil over skin, and scrape it off with curved bronze strigils. The smell is sharp, sour, and oddly clean. They shave daily not for fashion, but to spot lice. The barracks latrines, long benches over running water, are cleaned religiously, but still manage to be the least enviable post in the rotation. The army's obsession with order extends even to filth. Keep your shield polished and your bowels steady. One medicus jokes, or Mars will claim you early. When it comes to sexual health, advice shifts from the practical to the poetic. The medics prescribe concoctions of honey, vinegar, myrrh, and even crushed olive leaves as purifiers. Some soldiers swear by garlic as a cure-all. Others carry amulets carved with Venus's symbols, hoping divine favor will double as disinfectant. The line between medicine and magic was blurry, and most didn't care which side worked. Prostitution being as common as bread stalls, the empire tried to manage the inevitable. Licensed brothels kept registers, and some even required regular checkups by local physicians, not for compassion, but for economy. A sick army was a slow army. Commanders didn't lecture about morality, they lectured about efficiency. A legion marching with an outbreak of sores or fevers moved like a broken machine. So the prefect's advice was brutally practical. Choose clean houses, not cheap ones. Still soldiers being soldiers, warnings turned into jokes. Graffiti near Pompeii's Lupanaria includes lines like "Cave Venus beware," Venus scribbled beside crude sketches of centurions limping. Humor softened the embarrassment, but the fear was real. The empire's medical papyri described symptoms we'd recognize instantly: burning pain rashes, fevers, ulcers. They didn't have names like syphilis yet, but the experience was eternal. Bathhouses, the pride of Roman culture, weren't much safer. Shared sponges, reused towels, communal pools. Perfect breeding grounds for every microscopic invader. Mars forgot to discipline. Still, no one could resist them. The baths were the Roman soldier's reward, the only place he could feel human again. After weeks in armor, the plunge into warm water felt like rebirth. You can almost sympathize. Would you rather risk infection or go unwashed through a Mediterranean summer? The medicus's tent tells another story. Its walls are lined with jars, honey vinegar, resin, poppy extract. Tools gleam in the dim light, bronze scalpels and tweezers, more terrifying than comforting. The surgeon's hands move fast, no gloves, no anesthesia, just prayers to Aesculapius and a helper with a strong stomach. Sometimes the treatment hurt more than the illness. But medicine in Rome was built on courage and guesswork. Failure wasn't moral, only expected. Not that soldiers were entirely helpless. Some learned local remedies during campaigns. Germanic herbs for inflammation, Egyptian resins for wounds, Gallic honey mixtures that actually worked. The empire was a pharmacy on legs, every conquest bringing new cures and new curiosities. When you spend decades on the road, survival teaches innovation. The army even had medical ranks. Capsari, the bandage bearers, Medici Ordinari, regular doctors and architri, chief surgeons. These men doubled as moral enforcers. Keep clean, keep sharp, keep sober. They preached their tone halfway between nurse and executioner. Any soldier showing signs of illness was isolated until fit for duty. The Romans didn't understand contagion, but they recognized consequences. The strange part is how faith never lost ground to fear. Shrines to Hygeia, goddess of health, stood near infirmaries. Incense burned for Mars and Apollo to bless both wounds and sins. A soldier might confess his ailment to the gods before the doctor, hoping divine discretion proved gentler. Some even left little lead tablets, curse scrolls, asking the gods to punish whoever gave them their latest misfortune. One tablet unearthed near Cologne reads, "May his groin swell like pride." Even misery found its poetry. Despite it all, the Roman army's hygiene was centuries ahead of its time. While peasants outside the walls drank from ditches, soldiers boiled water and used sponges on sticks in flowing streams. Primitive, yes, but effective. It's no coincidence that legionaries often outlived civilians. Rome's obsession with routine kept its soldiers alive longer than luck alone. You finish another inspection, watching recruits clean gear and scrape mud from sandals. The medicus passes by muttering about vinegar rations, and someone snickers. Better sour wine than sour flesh. Laughter ripples equal parts disgust and relief. Beneath it lies the truth. The empire never admitted aloud the real strength of Rome wasn't iron, it was hygiene, humor, and a little superstition. And as the sun dips behind the fort's stone walls, the smell of oil and vinegar mingling with dust, you realize that even a world built on conquest pauses each evening for the smallest, most human of victories, staying alive another day without becoming history's next cautionary tale. A soldier's calendar is measured not in seasons, but in campaigns, and sometimes between wars, a strange mercy arrives leave. The word feels almost mythical after years of marching, drilling, and pretending the world outside the fort no longer exists. When Rome finally let its soldiers go home, it discovered that loyalty and loneliness were harder to command than any legion. You receive the order, like a miracle written on papyrus, 10 days of liberty sanctioned by the prefect, pay in hand. The moment you leave the gate, you smell it, the sweetness of wine, the smoke of city fires, the perfume of women who don't speak in ranks. Civilization hits the senses like ambrosia spiked with guilt. For most soldiers, the first stop isn't a temple tavern. It's home. But home has changed in 20 years. Parents or older siblings grown the city unfamiliar. The children playing in the forum don't know your face. And if you had a companion once, a concubine, a local girl, Maybe a camp follower who drifted on to another garrison. She's probably gone. The laws of Augustus still shadow your steps. Technically, you're not supposed to be married yet, not until the ink of your discharge scroll dries. But love doesn't read decrees. By the 2nd century, emperors began to see the problem. The army's strength depended on contentment, and a man with no hope of family was dangerous to himself and others. So reforms crept in. Claudius winked at unofficial unions. Hadrian turned a blind eye altogether. And by the time of Septimius Severus, the law itself bent soldiers could marry openly. The empire had finally realized that denying affection didn't create discipline, it created despair. You pass through a provincial town and see what that compromise looks like. Veterans walk with wives on their arms, their children playing beside them in miniature versions of legionary tunics. These aren't aristocrats. They're retired rankers who traded swords for plows, marching orders for market haggling. Each wears a small bronze diploma around his neck, the diploma militaris, a discharge certificate granting citizenship to him and crucially to his children. It's more than paperwork. It's redemption. Not that reform erased the double life entirely. Many still juggle 2 existences, soldier on duty, husband in spirit. Letters travel back and forth between forts and families, carried by merchants or messengers. Some survive written in careful Latin, full of yearning, and the mundane send more wool. I dream of your bread. Kiss the boy. They read like postcards from a world where duty and affection share custody of the same man. You meet one veteran, Marcus of the 10th Legion, who grins through a missing tooth and says, "They let us marry now, but the army still thinks love's a civilian sport." He gestures to his farm, neat rows, well tended. His wife waves from the doorway, flower on her arms. "She kept me more disciplined than any centurion," he says. And you believe him. Back in the camp, not everyone celebrates reform. Old officers mutter that softness breeds weakness, that marriage ties a man's courage to his hearth. But the younger ones laugh and say, "Better a faithful wife than a tavern debt." You sense the generational shift, Rome evolving not from morality, but from practicality. An empire that conquers the world eventually has to conquer loneliness too. The marriage reforms ripple through the ranks. Soldiers start sending for families, building small quarters near forts. The Canabae, once unofficial, grow into permanent settlements with bakeries, bathhouses, and shrines. What began as shadow families now becomes Roman suburbia. You can almost hear Augustus turning in his tomb, but the empire itself sighs in relief. Stability is good business. And yet every reunion carries its ghosts. Some men return to find the world unwilling to wait for them. Others marry quickly, desperate to fill years of silence. A few discover that peace feels stranger than war. The same discipline that once kept them alive now makes domestic life feel like marching in circles. Their wives joke that they still sleep on command. Even the poets notice the change. Inscriptions on veterans' tombs begin to include wives' names, not just ranks and honors. To Gaius Flavius, soldier of the 2nd Legion, and to his beloved Aurelia, who warmed his winters. It's the kind of epitaph that would have been scandalous a century earlier. Now it's just Rome growing up learning that love like conquest needs management. Somewhere near the Rhine frontier, a band of soldiers gathers at a tavern, celebrating a comrade's discharge. The toasts rise to Mars, to the emperor, to freedom, to wives waiting downriver. The laughter rings loud enough to make the innkeeper nervous, but it's the laughter of men who've earned it. Tomorrow they'll scatter some to farms, some to workshops, some back to the only home they've ever really known, the army. As the wine runs low, you realize the truth. Every empire eventually learns rules can govern behavior, but not longing. Augustus tried to suppress it. Severus tried to regulate it. But affection always marched beside the legions, unlisted but undefeated. The soldiers of Rome fought wars for emperors, but they endured them for the small, ordinary hope of being human again. And when the next trumpet sounds calling another generation to arms, the pattern will repeat. Love banned, love endured, love reinstated. The empire conquers, collapses, reforms. And through it all, someone somewhere still waits by a door, hearing hoofbeats in the distance. Rome's legions could outlast empires, outfight kingdoms, and outmarch death. But no army ever learned how to conquer loneliness. You can win the world and still lose your heart to distant silence or time. You stand at the edge of a camp near the Danube frontier. The empire is old now, its maps fading at the edges, its soldiers fewer, older, slower. The eagles still glitter on their poles, but their shine looks tired, like a memory that refuses to dim completely. You've spent decades marching under those wings, fighting, laughing, pretending that rules were enough to contain what it means to be human. Some nights, the wind carries the smell of the taverns from across the river, the scent of wine, of bread, of everything the regulations told you to resist. You've outlived emperors, centurions, and the foolishness of youth, but not the pulse of longing. The young recruits still joke about women. The old ones still pretend they've forgotten how to, and the cycle keeps repeating like an echo through centuries. The historians will later call this discipline or virtue or control. But you know better. It's survival disguised as philosophy. The Romans didn't invent repression. They refined it into routine. They built aqueducts for water and walls for enemies. But their most enduring architecture was psychological, the invisible fortress each man built around his own desire. The strange part, it worked. That control, the willingness to silence the body for the sake of duty, made Rome unstoppable. Yet the cost hums under every victory. For all the triumphs carved into marble, the real story hides in the letters, the graffiti, the tombs. The soldier who wrote home asking for wool socks and kisses in the same line. The centurion who named his partner on his grave, knowing no senator would approve. The camp follower who raised children in the shadows of forts. They are the margins of history that the empire never meant to keep, but they survived anyway. By now, the legions have changed. The laws are looser, the discipline less cruel. Soldiers marry openly, build houses of stone instead of tents, plant vines in conquered soil. Rome learned slowly that people fight hardest when they have someone to fight for. The empire's heart softens not through conquest, but through affection reclaimed. And yet, beneath that progress, you can still hear Mars whispering in the dust. Be ready. Desire weakens discipline. Old habits never retire. They just learn to smile. You watch the camp settle for the night. Fires flicker. Someone hums an old marching song that has somehow survived every reform and every emperor. Its words are crude, funny, and heartbreakingly human. Around you, the veterans drift into silence, staring at flames like men who've seen everything except peace that lasts. In your mind, you trace the pattern of it all. The rules forbidding marriage, the concubines and lovers, the soldiers who turned loneliness into humor, the ones who turned affection into rebellion, and those who turned discipline into faith. It all blurs into one truth. An empire can command armies, but it can't legislate emotion. You can standardize armor rations and pay, but not the ache for warmth. And maybe that's what made Rome so human after all. For every marble statue of Mars, there was a wooden toy carved for a soldier's hidden son. For every law against intimacy, a secret letter tucked into a boot. For every sermon on virtue, a whispered laugh under canvas when the torches went out. The empire that ruled continents was at its core a collection of tired men trying to make sense of silence. Now, as the stars settle above the camp and the fire burns low, you feel it, that thin line between exhaustion and peace. The rules, the shame, the longing, they all melt into the same quiet acceptance. You did your duty. You kept your sword sharp. You carried the weight that countless others carried before you. And beneath all the marble and myth, that's what the Roman army really was. Not just an engine of conquest, but a chorus of human contradictions marching towards sleep. The wind cools the last torch gutters. Somewhere far off, a nightbird calls once and goes silent. You lie back on your cloak, the stars unmoving above the ground, solid beneath the heartbeat, steady and ancient. Rome fades, but the rhythm remains, the rhythm of men who loved, endured and waited under the same indifferent sky. You've heard how Roman soldiers mastered their bodies and buried their hearts. But what about their days? The armor doesn't polish itself, and empires don't run on glory alone. From dawn drills to dusk patrols, every heartbeat belongs to the schedule. So let's wake with the legion and march straight into a Roman soldier's ordinary, exhausting perfection. It begins before dawn, before even the roosters of Rome have decided whether it's worth the trouble. The air in the barracks is thick with sleep and the sour smell of sweat-soaked wool. You wake not because you want to, but because the centurion's horn will blare soon, and no man wants to be the one still drooling when it does. You pull your blanket tighter for a moment longer, feeling that brief, dangerous luxury called comfort. The straw mattress crunches beneath you stiff from last night's humidity, and you can already feel your armor's chill waiting beside the bed like an impatient creditor. Your eyes adjust to the murk. Around you, rows of men do the same dance stretch, groan curse softly in Latin, then reach for their sandals. No one speaks much yet. Speech before sunrise is a privilege reserved for philosophers, not soldiers. The flicker of a single oil lamp shows faces that all look the same at this hour. Mud-smeared, half-shaven, half-human. You run your hand over the helmet beside you. The metal feels damp, almost alive with condensation. You wipe it with a rag that's somehow always dirtier than the helmet itself. You reach for your tunica, still smelling of last week's campaign dust. The cloth sticks slightly to your skin, it always does. By the time your belt is fastened and your caligy laced, your fingers already ache from the cold. Outside, the horizon starts to bleed a pale orange, the kind of color painters like to call divine. But for you, it just means another day of orders. The barracks are not silent now. The low murmur of 50 legionaries putting on their lives echoes in wooden rhythm buckles, snapping armor, clinking blades, sliding into scabbards. The scent is unmistakable vinegar from last night's weapon cleaning oil for the hinges and that faint metallic tang of iron that never leaves your nostrils. If the gods of Rome ever breathed, you imagine it would smell exactly like this. You hear the first shout from the doorway, your centurion, Gaius Decimus, whose lungs seemed carved from marble and whose patience was last seen in Hispania, buried under the enemy dead. "Up, you sons of Mars," he roars, voice scraping like sandpaper across the dawn. "Do you plan to sleep through the Empire's glory?" The sarcasm burns hotter than the morning fire pit, but no one dares laugh. You straighten up. In this world, obedience isn't virtue, it's survival. You fall into line outside, breath misting in the cold. The ground crunches under your sandals, the smell of smoke wafting from the camp's cooking fires. The sky is a canvas of pink and gray, and for a brief, absurd second, you think it's beautiful. Then someone sneezes behind you, and the moment dies. You remember your training, how they taught you to wake like a machine, how to fold your blanket tight enough that a centurion could bounce a coin off it. A messy bed breeds a messy mind, your old Opsha once said. You believed him mostly because he made you run laps until you did. Now, years later, the habit clings to you like old leather. You can pack your gear blindfolded, find your spear in the dark, and slip into formation half asleep. Efficiency is the closest thing to comfort a legionary ever gets. A few men whisper jokes quietly, always quietly. Someone mutters about the cook's barley being cursed. Another swears he saw a rat big enough to enlist. You smirk, though you don't join in. Humor before the horn is dangerous. It can turn into punishment faster than a sword stroke. The trumpeter finally raises his instrument. The first note splits the air sharp and metallic, cutting through the camp like a blade. You flinch instinctively, though you've heard that sound every morning for years. It's not music, it's command. Within seconds, the entire cohort stirs like one living beast. The tents unzip, the fires hiss, and the thousand little noises of military life fuse into a single heartbeat. You join the march toward the parade ground. The earth is damp, your sandals sink slightly into the mud, and the weight of your gear presses into your shoulders. The scutum shield thumps against your back with each step. It's comforting in a way, like the world reminding you who you are. Across the yard, a column of recruits stumbles through their first morning routine. You remember when you looked like that lost, pale clumsy with the armor? You even pity them a little until your centurion passes by and growls, "Keep your eyes front, veteran." You obey instantly, spine straight, eyes forward. Mercy is not a currency used often in this economy. The sun finally rises, glaring gold, against the polished helmets. The air warms just enough to wake the flies. The smell of oil and iron mixes with the faint sweetness of distant vineyards. Somewhere out there, citizens of the Empire are already trading, praying, gossiping. You, meanwhile, are about to spend the next hour standing so still that your knees will hum. And as you stare at the flag rippling above the signum symbol of your unit, you feel the same dull pride you always do. You're part of something vast, something that outlives names. But pride is a fickle friend. It doesn't warm your hands or fill your stomach. It just whispers that you matter to Rome, even if Rome wouldn't notice if you vanished tomorrow. A centurion's voice barks again, calling for inspection. You take one deep breath and step forward. The day has begun, whether you like it or not. The centurion's boots thud through the ranks with a rhythm every soldier knows by heart. He doesn't walk, he prowls. Behind him trails the Opsho carrying a vine staff polished smooth from years of correction. The air still smells faintly of damp leather and smoke, and you can feel the anticipation rolling down the line like static. Every man straightens his back, adjusts his belt, and tries to look like he was born ready to conquer Gaul. Your lorica segmentata creaks as you inhale the segmented armor plates sliding together like a puzzle forged by anxiety. You glance left. Marcus from Narbo is biting his lip again, a habit that's cost him more skin than any battle. To your right, Titus whispers a prayer to Mars, his lips barely moving. Everyone has their ritual before inspection. Some pray, some spit, some try to stop sweating. You just stare at your sword and pretend you love your job. The centurion stops in front of you. You can smell the iron polish on his cuirass. See the flecks of dust clinging to his cloak. He looks you over from helmet to sandals with the same expression a butcher gives a questionable piece of meat. Blade, he orders flatly. You draw your gladius with care, holding it out horizontally. The edge catches the dawn's light, still sharp, still clean. You know the rule: dull swords, dull minds. He runs a calloused finger along the edge, nods once, and moves on. A small victory, invisible to all but your pulse. When the inspection's done, the tribune himself strides forward. He's young, too young, you think, and wears his purple stripe like a boy who's been told it makes him important. His Latin sounds fresh from the academy, not the battlefield. Still, when he raises his hand, even the birds hush. Men of the 10th Legion, he begins, voice echoing against the camp wall. Today, you serve not just yourselves, but the eternal might of Rome. You've heard this speech 100 times from 100 mouths. The wording changes, the rhythm shifts, but the promise never does. Rome is eternal, and you are its muscle. You repeat the oath automatically, your tongue knows it better than your mind. You swear loyalty to the emperor, obedience to command, and faith to the gods who supposedly watch. Sometimes you wonder if they actually do. Jupiter must be exhausted by now, trying to keep track of every soldier shouting his name at sunrise. The horns blow again, a long deep note that vibrates in your chest. Oath complete, the ritual dissolves back into routine. Some men grin with the relief of survival. Others stare ahead, already thinking of their next punishment or payday. The military thrives on rhythm work. Eat, march, fight, repeat. It's not so different from life back home. Except back home, you could at least sleep past dawn, and no one hit you for dropping your bread. You glance down at your scutum, its red paint chipped, the metal boss dented from years of campaigns. Each mark tells a story. The crack near the rim, Parthia. The faint scorched line across the center, Germania. You could write your biography on that shield if anyone cared to read it. As the centurion shouts new orders, you form ranks again. The banners catch the wind, golden eagles glittering under the sun. The signifer, the standard bearer, stands tall beside the cohort's flagpole. He carries not just the emblem, but the soul of the unit. Losing it in battle would mean disgrace worse than death. You think of men who've died clutching that pole, refusing to let it fall, even as the enemy cut them down. Sometimes you wonder if bravery is just fear that got tired of running. The tribune dismisses you to the parade ground for drill assignments, and the ranks loosen like a wave breaking. Armor groans, sandals scrape, and someone finally breathes again. The morning stiffness gives way to that familiar hum of purpose. You catch the eye of a veteran, old Publius, his face carved from more campaigns than you can count. He grins at you, toothless but confident. Another glorious day in paradise, he mutters, and you can't help but laugh under your breath. As you march toward the field, the smell of wet grass rises, mingling with dust and sweat. In the distance, the camp's smiths hammer rhythmically, shaping new helmets and spearheads. Every clang feels like punctuation to your thoughts. You remember what they say: Rome's discipline is its greatest weapon. It sounds noble when carved into marble, but less so when you're the one doing the marching. Somewhere near the gate, you pass a shrine to Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, a small altar piled with coins, fruit, and the occasional chicken feather. You pause for half a heartbeat and toss a small copper coin into the bowl. You don't expect divine favor, just fewer blisters. The gods, if they're real, probably appreciate the honesty. The morning light grows stronger now, burning the mist off the parade field. The centurions call the cohorts into their grids, each man aligning his shield edge perfectly with his neighbor's. It's beautiful in a strangely terrifying way. Hundreds of men breathing, standing, waiting as one organism. You feel it in your bones, the discipline, the unity. the inevitability. You take one more deep breath, straighten your back, and prepare for the drills to begin. Somewhere behind you, a crow lands on the barrack roof and squawks as if mocking you for not having wings. By the time the horn signals breakfast, your stomach has already begun to protest like a small rebellion. The morning drills have yet to start, but hunger always arrives early. You march toward the mess area with the rest of the cohort, the line stretching like a centipede in armor. The air smells faintly of smoked grain and something suspiciously sour. The cook's grim men who've seen more burned porridge than battle are stirring giant pots over open fires. You clutch your wooden bowl chipped from travel and wait your turn. The ration for the day is the same as it's been since before you were born. Pulse a mush of barley boiled until it gives up all will to live. Sometimes they mix in bits of salt pork if fortune smiles, or garlic if the quartermaster is feeling generous. Today, it's plain gray and glutinous, a dish so modest it makes humility look arrogant. You take your portions aside and find a seat on a low wall beside your comrades. The spoon sticks upright in the porridge on its own. Titus grins. "See," he says. "That's engineering." You chuckle, though your laughter dies quickly when you taste the first bite. It's hot, sticky, and oddly metallic, as though the pot itself had a say in the recipe. But it fills you, and that's what matters. Rome doesn't feed its soldiers to impress them. It feeds them to keep them marching. You remember your last campaign in Britannia, when the supply line broke and you survived for a week on barley rainwater and misplaced optimism. Compared to that, this is luxury. A wineskin passes around. You take a small swig, the sour, watered-down Posca soldiers drink instead of wine. It tastes of vinegar and faint grapes, but it keeps your mouth from drying like parchment. You try not to think about what might be floating in it. The army teaches you many virtues, and selective blindness is one of them. The conversation flows easily now. Marcus tells a story about a centurion who tried to impress a general by eating scorpion stew. Publius shakes his head. "Nonsense," he says. "Scorpions are for Syrians, not senators." Someone jokes that the general probably made it a delicacy afterward. The laughter ripples down the line, tired but real. You finish your bowl and wipe it with a crust of bread so hard it could double as armor. Hardtack, they call it, though. You suspect the word tack refers to what it does to your teeth. It's made from wheat salt and the will of Vulcan himself. Some soldiers carve shapes into theirs for luck, a crude sun and eagle, even a heart. Yours is plain. You're not sentimental about bread. The centurion passes by checking that everyone eats quickly. "No lingering," he says. "We fight better on empty talk than full stomachs." He's right. Too much food makes armor feel heavier, and armor is already heavy enough to ruin your posture by 30. You gulp the last of your drink and stand feeling the grit of barley between your teeth. A stray dog circles the benches, sniffing for scraps. You toss it a crust and watch it vanish between tents. It's strange there are no citizens here, no families yet. Life finds a way. Even the flies have learned to march in formation. Someone brings up rumors of a new recipe spreading from the eastern provinces, bread baked with honey and goat cheese. The thought sounds like poetry to your empty wallet. You make a mental note that if you ever leave the army, you'll eat that every day until you forget the taste of pulse. Then you laugh quietly, because leaving the army isn't really an option unless Mars himself writes you a letter. Your mind drifts briefly to home, if you can still call it that. Your mother's kitchen, the smell of olive oil, the sound of neighbors arguing about taxes. It feels like another lifetime, another man's memory. You wonder how many of your comrades remember the same kind of scenes, and how many were born into this life with no other world to miss. The cook clangs a ladle against the pot, signaling the end of the meal. You scrape the last sticky bits from your bowl and hand it to a recruit to rinse. The water in the bucket is already brown, but no one complains. Hygiene in the Army is more theory than practice. As you sling your gear back over your shoulder, the sun has climbed higher, burning the dew from the grass. The camp buzzes again, horses snorting, smiths, hammering voices, shouting orders. The brief illusion of peace fades as quickly as it came. You look once more at the pot of barley bubbling over the fire, the surface popping like small explosions. It's simple, it's bland. It's survival in a bowl. Somewhere in the Empire, emperors are feasting on peacock tongues and garum-soaked fish. Here you get this. And somehow, it's enough. The centurion's horn sounds again, a reminder that comfort is measured in minutes. You pick up your shield and head for the training grounds. Breakfast is over. The real work is about to begin. The horn cuts through the air like a blade through quiet, its note long, sharp, and impossible to ignore. You're halfway to fastening your chin strap when the centurion bellows, "Form up!" And suddenly 100 men are running, tripping, shouting, and pretending not to. Discipline looks better from a distance. Up close, it's just organized chaos in sandals. They say the Roman army runs on 3 things: obedience, endurance, and fear of the man shouting at you. Within moments, the cohort arranges itself into perfect lines. Shields align, spears tilt, and the morning sunlight bounces off polished helmets like a warning to the horizon. If Rome ever needed a mirror, this would be it, an army reflecting its own obsession with order. Drill until you hate it, the centurion says, pacing in front of you. Then drill until you love it. You're not sure which stage you're in, but you suspect the second one's a myth. The Tesserarius calls out the commands, his voice cracking from overuse. "Advance," he roars, and 100 feet stomp forward in unison. The earth trembles lightly, dust rising like incense. The sound is hypnotic, thud, 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 a rhythm older than any hymn. You thrust your gladius forward, the short sword slicing the air, then retract it instantly to shield height. The movement is sharp, mechanical, perfect. Every soldier knows the Roman way of fighting is simple, but cruelly effective: step, stab, recover, repeat. None of the grand flourishes you see in amphitheater plays, no wide swings, no heroic twirls. Just economy of motion. Killing is craft. The weapon's design itself is pragmatic, broad, near the hilt, tapered near the point, built for thrusting through gaps in armor or ribs. It's not romantic, but it works. You glance sideways. Marcus is drenched in sweat already, his forehead shining under the helmet rim. Titus has that grin again, the one he gets when he's enjoying himself. You envy that. To him, drill feels like purpose. To you, it feels like repetition, dressed as destiny. The centurion walks the line, correcting stances with his vine staff. When he sees a spear droop, he raps it sharply. Keep it straight, or the next man won't. His logic is brutal, but flawless. One mistake multiplies down the line faster than gossip in a tavern. Shields up, he commands, and the wall of red rises instantly. The thump of scuda interlocking fills the field. You feel the vibration through your arm, through your bones. The formation is tight enough to block the sun. Now, advance. You move forward in slow, deliberate steps, shields overlapping like roof tiles. To an outsider, it would look almost graceful if grace could sweat. The man beside you stumbles slightly. Your shoulder meets his, pushing him back into rhythm. That's the unspoken law here. One man's mistake belongs to everyone. You've seen centurions punish an entire unit for a single soldier's failure. It's not cruelty, it's math. After an hour, your arm begins to shake from holding the shield. Your hand is slick, your knuckles raw, but there's no time to adjust. Again, the centurion calls, and you obey, because that's the only thing you know how to do. Somewhere in the haze of repetition, the movements blur together until you're not thinking anymore. You've become the rhythm itself. And that, strangely, is where the peace hides. You stop being a man with worries, hunger, or fear. You're just another gear in Rome's great machine. It's almost meditative if meditation came with bruises. The sun climbs higher. The smell of hot leather and churned soil fills your lungs. Dust clings to your face. Your tongue tastes of metal. Every breath scrapes the throat. Every movement hums with pain. Yet you keep going. You always do. The centurion finally signals a halt. Men drop to one knee, panting. Helmets come off, steam rising from their shaved heads. Someone jokes if Mars had sweat glands, they'd smell like us. Laughter breaks the fatigue for a heartbeat. Nearby, a group of recruits is practicing with wooden swords. Their strikes are clumsy, their rhythm off. One of them loses his grip, sending the weapon spinning into the dirt. The instructor smirks. Congratulations, you just killed a shrub. The recruits laugh nervously, and you remember being that green once. Back then, your shield felt heavier, your courage lighter. You can still recall your first real battle, how all the drills suddenly made sense when chaos erupted around you. The perfect lines, the measured thrusts, the unspoken trust between men, it all locked into place, like clockwork. Rome's strength isn't in individual heroes. It's in the choreography of obedience. Even Caesar himself once said that a disciplined legion is worth more than 1,000 brave fools. The centurion orders the final set formation changes. You shift from column to wedge to square the ranks, folding and unfolding like origami in armor. It's oddly beautiful geometry meeting warfare. When done right, it looks less like battle practice and more like a military ballet performed for indifferent gods. When the horn sounds the end, your arms feel like they've been carved from lead. You stand still, catching your breath. And the centurion nods once. Better, he says. That single word feels like a medal. As you wipe your face with your sleeve, you realize your entire body hums, not from exhaustion, but from the strange satisfaction of surviving another morning without disgrace. The drills may not feed you, but they remind you who you are, one disciplined heartbeat in the body of an empire that never stops marching. When there's no enemy to fight, Rome finds you something else to conquer. Usually dirt. The midday sun beats down like a personal insult, and you're standing at the edge of what will soon become a road or maybe a fort wall, or maybe just another strategic improvement some senator will later take credit for. The order is simple enough: build until you forget you're a soldier. You swing the pick into the soil, the blade biting deep. The sound is dull, rhythmic, relentless. Around you, hundreds of men dig, lift, hammer, and haul in perfect, miserable harmony. The clatter of tools replaces the sound of swords. Even the centurions work, though they somehow manage to look less sweaty doing it. It's easy to forget that Rome's empire wasn't just won by war, it was paved by it. Every legionary is part soldier, part construction worker, part unpaid engineer. The roads you lay today will carry future armies, merchants, and gossip long after your bones turn to dust. Somewhere in the Senate, a man in a clean toga will call it infrastructure. Here it's just another word for blisters. The foreman shouts instructions over the din: line straight, no curves, no weakness. You look down the trench, the alignment so precise you could roll a coin from end to end without a wobble. That's the Roman way. If a mountain gets in the path, You don't go around it, you go through. The work site buzzes with energy and profanity. Some men sing old marching songs to keep rhythm. Others curse the heat, the stones, the gods, and occasionally their mothers. Sweat runs down your back in steady rivulets, soaking your tunic until it clings like a second skin. You can smell iron from the shovels, pitch from the cartwheels, and a faint sweetness from the pine logs being sawed nearby. Beside you, Publius. The veteran pauses to wipe his brow. You know, he says, when I joined, I thought I'd see the world. Turns out I'm just helping build it. You laugh through your exhaustion, then lift another stone block into place. It lands with a satisfying thud. Progress in Rome always sounds heavy. A few yards away, a group is working on a ditch, a defensive trench deep enough to swallow a mule. The soil is clay and gravel unforgiving. The centurion supervising it has the patience of a short-tempered god. If it's not deep enough to drown a barbarian, he yells, it's not deep enough at all. Motivational speeches come in many forms here. When the lunch horn finally sounds, the tools drop instantly, as if by divine intervention. You sit on a rock gulping water that tastes faintly of metal from the bucket. The air vibrates with the hum of cicadas. Somewhere nearby, a mule brays, like it's sharing your opinion of this assignment. A younger soldier named Lucius collapses beside you, face red, chest heaving. This isn't why I joined, he groans. I wanted glory. You smirk. You'll get it. Maybe they'll name the ditch after you. He laughs weakly, but the truth sticks. Glory is rare. Ditches are eternal. You think about the empire's vastness, the thousands of miles of roads connecting cities and frontiers, all built by men like you. The Via Appia, the Via Flaminia, the endless web of stone veins feeding Rome's heart. It's strange to realize that your sweat will outlast your name. In the distance, you see a patrol returning from a nearby village, their armor dusty, their faces sunburned. One of them holds a scroll. Probably new orders or fresh complaints from the locals. You can already guess what it says: build faster. The Empire's appetite for progress makes Jupiter look frugal. After the break, the work resumes. You help lift a timber beam into place, muscles screaming in protest. Every push feels like a small war against gravity. You glance up and catch sight of a hawk circling high above, free, indifferent, untaxed. Trade places, you mutter under your breath. The bird wisely declines. By late afternoon, the road begins to take shape, a perfect straight ribbon of crushed stone and dust stretching toward the horizon. The sight almost feels holy, like witnessing civilization itself being stamped into the earth. Even your exhaustion can't hide a flicker of pride. When the centurion calls for the final inspection, everyone stands back, tools in hand, chests heaving. The line of the new road glows faintly under the lowering sun. Good, he says simply, which in centurion language means miracle achieved. You look down at your hands, blistered, bruised, streaked with dirt. There's satisfaction in that pain. You built something real, something Rome will march on long after you're gone. It's not glory, not exactly, but it's permanence, and that's rarer still. A trumpet blares from camp, signaling the end of the day's labor and the beginning of whatever passes for rest. You pick up your gear, glance once more at the straight road cutting through the wilderness, and can't help but think that's Rome, in a single line, unyielding, exhausting, and beautiful in spite of itself. By the time you stumble back into camp, the heat has mellowed into that honey-colored glow that makes everything look almost peaceful, almost. The tents flutter lazily in the breeze. The sound of hammers has softened, and for the first time all day, no one is yelling. You wipe the dust from your face with the back of your arm and realize that even the grime has hierarchy. The thin layer on your skin belongs to the Empire now. Camp life, though, has its own strange rhythm. You could call it a town, but that would be generous. It's more like a moving city made of canvas and sweat-built and dismantled faster than most people can decide what's for dinner. Everything has a place. The command tent at the center, the workshops to one side, the latrines, mercifully downwind, and rows upon rows of tents, identical as thoughts in a philosopher's head. You head toward your section, passing through the heart of legionary civilization. To your left, blacksmiths are still at work, their forges glowing orange against the dimming sky. The rhythmic clang of hammer on metal is strangely soothing, like the heartbeat of the camp itself. Sparks fly into the air, tracing brief constellations that vanish before you can name them. You nod to one of the smiths, a scarred man named Severus, who claims he once shoed Caesar's horse. He probably didn't, but no one corrects him. It's bad luck to interrupt a man swinging a hammer. Further down, the cooks are setting up for the evening meal. The smell of lentils, onions, and smoke mixes with the stench of drying leather. One pot has something that could generously be called stew. Another has something that looks more like regret. Still, after a day of digging roads, even regret smells delicious. You catch a whiff of garum, the fermented fish sauce Romans put on everything, and remember why no one likes standing near the cook fires for long. You find a place to sit near your tent. Titus is already there, tossing dice onto a small wooden board. "Care to lose your pay again?" he asks with a grin. You grin back because you know how this goes. Gambling in camp is as common as breathing, and only slightly less dangerous. The dice clatter, the coins clink, and within minutes insults are flying like arrows. "Jupiter himself couldn't roll that twice," Marcus shouts. "He doesn't need to," Titus says, sweeping up the winnings. Nearby, a group of soldiers argues about who fought worse in the last campaign, the Germans or the Parthians. Someone insists the Germans at least bathed more. The conversation evolves quickly into laughter, mock insults, and a heated debate over whose hometown wine could dissolve a shield faster. These small arguments are the closest thing to peace you'll ever get. Across the camp, the medicus tends to a man with a wrapped leg. The soldier winces, but the doctor's expression doesn't change. The Roman medical kit is impressive for its time: bronze scalpels, forceps, even sponges soaked in vinegar. But the methods are brisk. "It's only a scratch," the medicus says, as he prepares to stitch. You look away. You've seen scratches end careers. The camp buzzes with small dramas, nothing big, but enough to remind you that an army is just 1,000 bored men trying not to think too hard. One man carves his sweetheart's name into his shield. Another rewrites a letter home for the 5th time, trying to sound brave without lying. Somewhere, someone starts a bawdy song, and the laughter rolls down the tents like a wave. Then, like always, gossip finds you. Publius sits beside you, lowering his voice to that conspiratorial tone he reserves for sharing official secrets. "They say the governor's son insulted the legate at dinner last night," he says, eyes gleaming. "Threw a grape at him." You raise an eyebrow. "A grape, yes." Publius nods solemnly. "A symbolic grape." You both laugh until your ribs ache. Rome may run on discipline, but it lives on rumor. A breeze slips through camp, carrying the faint music of a distant flute. It's haunting soft and surprisingly tender for a place filled with weapons. You wonder who plays it, a homesick soldier, maybe? Or one of the slaves who travel with the legion, earning their peace in melody instead of pay. For a moment, Even the dice go silent. You stretch your legs, lean back on your elbows, and let your eyes wander toward the fading horizon. The sky is streaked in purple and gold, the kind of beauty soldiers notice precisely because they have so little of it. You think about how many sunsets you've seen from camps like this, how they all blend together into one endless evening of dust noise and stories. Someone passes a jug of Posca, sour as ever, but shared freely. You take a sip, grimace, and pass it on. It's tradition, this little ceremony of shared misery. No toast, no words, just the quiet acknowledgement that everyone here is tired, alive, and still Roman. Then the bugle sounds again, short-clipped routine. It means watch duty assignments are about to be read. Laughter fades, dice vanish into pouches, and men rise slowly, knowing rest will have to wait. You sigh, stretch your shoulders, and get ready to stand guard again. The night may bring calm, but in the Legion, calm never lasts long. First watch, third post, eastern wall. The Optio's voice carries through the camp, and just like that, your night plans evaporate. You grab your shield and helmet again, the metal still warm from the day's sun. Hooked to your belt is the same short sword that's been your bedtime companion since you joined. You could almost miss it if it weren't there, like a limb you didn't ask for, but can't live without. The air outside has cooled thick with the scent of pine and camp smoke. The sky above is deep indigo, that brief hour before the stars take full control. You walk the packed earth path toward your post boots, crunching softly. Somewhere behind you, laughter still flickers from the tents, but it fades quickly as the watch rotation settles in. You pass a torch stuck into the ground. Its flame hisses against the night breeze, throwing shadows across the wooden palisade. The eastern wall looks out over open land, rolling hills, a thin strip of forest, and far beyond that, the suggestion of mountains. Beautiful. If you weren't so aware that beauty in the dark usually means danger in daylight. You take your position beside another guard, an older man named Quintus, who's seen more watches than birthdays he can remember. His beard glows faintly in the firelight, and his eyes are half hidden beneath his helmet's rim. Quiet night, he mutters. That's usually when something goes wrong. You rest your spear against the wall and scan the darkness. Nothing moves but the grass. The wind hums softly through the wooden stakes, and in the distance you can just hear the faint croak of frogs by the stream. It's peaceful in that deceptive way, the kind of peace that makes you forget how quickly the world can turn. You shift your weight, the leather straps on your armor, creaking like tired joints. Quintus tells stories to pass the time. He always does. Did I ever tell you about the time a goat got into the camp and everyone thought it was a barbarian spy? You grin. 3 times. Good, he says. Then I'm consistent. He chuckles, then leans on his spear. You young ones don't know how lucky you are. Back in Africa, the heat was so bad our helmets cooked us like oysters. You raise an eyebrow. You've been to Africa? He nods proudly. Once. The sand got in places I'm still discovering. Hours on watch stretch differently, slower, heavier. You find yourself staring at the same shadow for minutes, convinced it's moving. Every whisper of wind feels personal. The torch beside you sputters, and the scent of burning oil mixes with the earth's chill. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots, and you nearly jump. Quintus laughs quietly. Relax. If it's an enemy, he'll scream before he kills you. Strangely, that's comforting. To keep awake, you think about home again, though it's more habit than hope. You picture your street in the city, the uneven cobblestones, the baker who used to throw you stale bread as a boy. You remember your mother's voice, your father's silence, the way everything smelled faintly of olives and ambition. You wonder if they'd recognize you now, all armor and calluses. Then you decide it doesn't matter. Rome changes men faster than memory can keep up. You shift again, glancing down at the ground below. The moonlight turns the camp's ditch into a silver ribbon. Beyond it, the world is dark and wide and unsupervised. You've heard the stories, ambushes at dawn, spies slipping through shadows, wild tribes who fight naked just to scare you. But tonight there's nothing. Only the slow rhythm of your breathing and the faint crackle of the torch. Sometimes you think this right here is the truest face of soldiering. Not the battles or the speeches, but the waiting. The endless standing, listening, pretending to see in the dark. No one sings about the man who stayed awake so others could sleep, but maybe they should. Halfway through the shift, a patrol walks by. 4 men, half alert, half asleep. Their armor catches the light, their faces pale ghosts under the helmets. "All clear?" the leader asks. "All clear," you answer, and the ritual passes like a handshake with the night. The hours drip by. You lose track of how long you've been leaning on the wall. Your mind wanders to the absurdities of life in uniform, how you've learned to fear both silence and noise, how the same sun that burns you by day is now your best friend by absence. You think about how many men have stood exactly here, staring into exactly this kind of darkness, all believing they were part of something eternal. You almost laugh at the thought. Then movement. A faint shimmer beyond the ditch. Your hand tightens around your spear. Quintus sees it too. Both of you hold still, eyes straining. The shape wavers, then resolves itself into a deer. Just a deer. It freezes, stares back with indifferent eyes, then bolts into the woods. Quintus exhales. "See?" The enemy retreats in terror. You laugh, but your pulse takes longer to calm down. The final hour crawls. By the time relief arrives, your legs ache, your eyelids feel heavier than your armor, and your thoughts move like syrup. You nod to the next pair of guards, murmur a quick safe watch, and head back through the camp. The fires have burned low now. Men snore softly in the tents, the smell of ash and damp earth thick in the air. You unstrap your armor piece by piece, each buckle sighing in relief. As you sit down, stretching sore shoulders, you can still feel the weight of the night on you. Its quiet, its tension, its strange, stubborn beauty. And just before you lie down, you think to yourself, if eternity ever had a sound, it would probably be the silence of a Roman night watch. Morning creeps in like a thief, quiet silver, and far too soon. You've slept maybe 3 hours, if you're being generous. The camp stirs again, this time slower, more human. No horns yet, just the soft shuffling of men trying to wake without cursing the gods. You rub your face, stretch, and reach instinctively for your armor, even though your muscles are still begging for peace. The rule is simple. A Roman soldier is never truly off duty. You eat, you build, you march, you bleed, but rest, that's for civilians. Someone's already rekindled the fire pit outside your tent. A thin curl of smoke rises into the pale morning sky. You crouch near it, warming your hands, and catch the scent of last night's stew, now reduced to a congealed lump in the pot. Titus sits beside you, rubbing his eyes. "I dreamed of olives," he mutters. You think that's a sign? You shrug. If the gods wanted to talk to you, they'd pick better metaphors. Breakfast is short, rough, and familiar. More pulls hard bread and watered wine. The cooks could make a fortune selling variety if variety existed. But today you're grateful for the heat. You eat slowly, letting the warmth chase the chill from your bones. Around you men mumble, stretch, spit, and begin their daily rituals, sharpening blades, patching sandals, oiling armor. The smell of iron and vinegar fills the air again. Your lorica segmentata has a broken strap near the shoulder, one of those little things that can turn inconveniently fatal. You sit cross-legged, threading leather through the buckle while Publius leans over to comment like an unwanted workshop foreman. You know, in my day, he says, we didn't bother fixing armor until it fell off. And how many scars did that policy earn you? You ask. He grins, tapping his chest where a jagged line runs down to his ribs. One for every promotion I didn't get. When the morning horn finally sounds, no one rushes. The centurions give you a short reprieve before drills begin again. Repairs come first, and repairs are sacred. A soldier's equipment is both his coffin and his legacy. You run a whetstone down your blade, the rasping sound, steady and soothing. Each stroke pulls the dullness away like memory. Nearby, a few men are mending their scuta, hammering out dents, tightening the rivets. The shields painted deep red with gold insignia look like bruised suns when they catch the light. Somewhere down the line, the armorer shouts over the clatter. Who bent a pilum again? No one answers, but the laughter that follows is answer enough. The throwing spear's design means it bends on impact, clever engineering to keep enemies from throwing it back. It also means endless work for the poor fool tasked with straightening the things. As the day warms, small mercies reveal themselves. A vendor from a nearby village has been allowed inside the gates, an old man with figs, cheese, and thin wine. The sight alone feels decadent. You trade a few copper coins for a handful of figs. Their sweetness almost shocking after weeks of salt and starch. Titus moans dramatically. By the gods, I'd die for another one. You grin. You might if you eat too many. For a while, the camp feels almost domestic. Men lounge near their tents writing letters or mending tunics. A pair of recruits argue over who has to clean the latrine trench, a debate that ends the way all such debates do, with both of them going. You watch a stray chicken weave between the rows of tents, pecking at crumbs, and evading every attempted capture. Somehow it feels symbolic. You take a moment to oil your helmet, rubbing the metal until it shines faintly. The reflection that stares back at you is older than you remember. Sunburned, scarred, a little thinner, a little harder. You wonder when exactly you stopped being a young man and became part of this endless machine of Rome. It's not sadness, not really, just that strange ache that comes from realizing time has marched even faster than you have. Nearby, the camp's clerks, those lucky souls who can write without sweating, are counting rations. One of them, a narrow-faced man with ink-stained fingers, mutters under his breath. The empire expands faster than our paperwork. You nod sympathetically. Bureaucracy is Rome's other weapon, slower than a sword, but just as lethal if you forget a signature. By midday, the sun blazes again. You've finished your repairs and retreated into the shade of your tent. The ground beneath you is warm, the air thick with dust. You can hear everything. The clang of the smithy, the lazy hum of flies, the distant shouts of officers drilling recruits. It's strange how comforting noise can become when silence only means trouble. Titus joins you again, lying on his back, staring at the canvas roof. You ever think about quitting, he asks. You snort. And do what? Open a bakery? Sure, he says. Bread, wine, maybe a tavern. Call it the Fat Centurion. You smile. I'd drink there. For a moment, you both just lie there, half laughing, half dreaming of a world without orders or armor. Then, inevitably, the horn blows again. The sound cuts through your daydream like a chisel through marble. Afternoon formation awaits. You groan, pick up your shield, and stand. The figs are gone, the rest is over, and Rome eternal demanding. Rome calls you back to service. Dusk creeps in quietly. the kind that turns every helmet into a mirror of the dying sun. You fall back into formation for evening duty, but even the centurions sound tired now. The day's sweat has dried into salt patches across your tunic, and every breath tastes of dust. By the time the last order is barked, men scatter like pebbles tossed in water, some to eat, some to sleep, most to simply exist in that fragile gap before the next command. You wander toward the fire pits. The cooks are already at it again, stirring pots of lentils and chopped onions with spoons long enough to double as spears. The smell is edible. You hold out your bowl, and a ladleful lands with a sound somewhere between a splash and a sigh. It's not food exactly, but it's something warm to remind your body you're still alive. You sit cross-legged on the ground, balancing the bowl on your knees, and take a cautious bite. Bland, familiar, comforting in a way only predictability can be. Across from you, Marcus plucks a lyre missing 2 strings. I learned this one from a Greek prisoner, he says. He swore it could make a man weep. He plucks again, mostly from the noise. Laughter rolls through the group. Publius joins in with a story about a senator who mistook boiled turnips for oysters. No one believes him, but everyone laughs anyway. Stories here are less about truth and more about survival. The fire crackles sparks drifting up to the stars that are finally punching through the twilight. You feel the day unwind from your shoulders. The camp has its own kind of music now. Low voices, metal clinks, the occasional burst of laughter, and somewhere a donkey braying its opinion on Roman leadership. The sound blends into something steady, timeless, almost sacred. You lean back, watching the flames twist and dance. The heat stings your cheeks, but you don't move. There's something hypnotic about it, the way the firelight plays across faces, carving every soldier into a statue of bronze and exhaustion. These men, the ones you curse and march beside, and occasionally want to strangle, are your family now. Not by choice, but by the strange gravity of shared suffering. Someone starts humming softly a tune from the province's unfamiliar but soothing. One by one, voices join in, rough and out of sync, but heartfelt. It's not a song for glory or victory, just a song to fill the space between one day and the next. For a few minutes, you forget where you are. You could be anywhere, a village, a port, a quiet street in Rome, anywhere that isn't temporary. The warmth seeps into your bones, loosening everything that's been clenched since dawn. You think about how many nights like this you've lived through. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Different camps, same firelight, same laughter, same smell of lentils. The empire shifts and grows, but this never changes. It's oddly comforting knowing that even if Rome burns someday, some soldier somewhere will still be doing this, eating, laughing, pretending he's not afraid of tomorrow. Titus breaks the peace by tossing a twig into the fire. You think the gods ever watch us? He asks suddenly. All this? You shrug. If they do, they're either very proud or very bored. Publius nods. Or both. Pride and boredom built this empire, didn't they? More laughter. It fades quickly, though, as the question lingers longer than the joke. You stare into the fire again. The flames twist and snap like thoughts you can't hold on to. You remember the oaths you swore, the faces you've buried, the friends who didn't make it past their first campaign. You wonder if they got nights like this before the end, quiet, almost peaceful, when Rome felt less like a machine and more like a heartbeat. A horn sounds in the distance, soft, signaling curfew. The sound rolls across the camp like a sigh. Men begin dousing smaller fires, washing bowls, muttering prayers. A few stragglers linger, unwilling to surrender the warmth. You watch them go one by one, until it's just you and the embers. The sky has deepened now into a sheet of dark velvet scattered with stars. Somewhere beyond those lights, the world keeps spinning cities, celebrating lovers, whispering emperors, plotting. None of it feels real from here. The fire pops once more, startling you from your thoughts. You stir the ashes with a stick and watch them collapse inward, glowing red like dying eyes. As you rise, the night air hits you cool and clean. You breathe deeply, tasting wood smoke and earth. All around you, the camp has gone quiet again. Rows of tents glowing faintly from within, guards pacing the perimeter, the soft murmur of men talking in their sleep. It's not peace exactly, but it's close enough. You sling your cloak over your shoulders and head toward your tent. The ground crunches beneath your sandals, and the stars overhead seem sharper, now clearer. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought drifts by. Maybe eternity isn't marble temples or endless conquest. Maybe it's just this. The sound of tired men under foreign skies, still breathing, still waiting, still Roman. The camp sleeps, but you don't, at least not yet. The fire outside your tent has burned down to glowing threads, soft as embers of memory. You sit there a while longer, cloak wrapped around your shoulders, letting the last warmth cling to you before the cold winds. The stars are shockingly bright tonight, sharp enough to cut the darkness. You tilt your head back and watch them glitter over the silent camp, over the shields stacked in neat rows, over 1,000 dreams. Identical in shape, but different in pain. They say a Roman soldier should sleep ready to wake at a moment's notice, and you've learned to do just that. You lay your gladius within arm's reach helmet beside it, shield propped against the tent pole. Your fingers brush each item in the same order every night, a little ritual of reassurance, steel, leather, wood order. Rome might be far away, but its discipline follows you even into your dreams. You lie back the rough wool blanket scratching against your skin. The ground beneath is hard and uneven, but after years of marching, you hardly notice. The night hums quietly around you. Distant snores, a horse shifting in its pen, the faint creak of a guard's armor as he turns his post. It's almost soothing, this orchestra of weariness. And then, as you often do, you drift into thought before sleep. Not the grand kind about glory or conquest, those fade fast once you've seen what glory costs, but smaller thoughts, quieter ones. You picture your street in Rome, the sound of carts on stone, the smell of baked bread in the morning. You wonder if your mother still prays for you, if your father ever speaks of you, if the neighbors even remember your name. It's funny in a sad sort of way, how an empire can know you as a number, a unit, a fraction of a legion. And yet you're still just one man trying to stay warm on a patch of foreign soil. You've built roads that will outlive your children, carried banners that have seen 3 emperors come and go. But tonight, you're just another heartbeat in the dark. A breeze slips through the tent flap, cool against your face. You pull the cloak tighter and stare at the roof's dim canvas, tracing the lines where moonlight sneaks through the seams. You think about all the places you've been, German forests that smelled of pine and blood, African sands that burned your feet, Gaulish rivers that froze your hands. Every province has left its mark on you, some visible, some not. You remember the veterans who used to tell you stories when you were new men with faces like weathered stone, who spoke about retirement in hushed tones as if it were a myth. Just one more campaign, they'd say. Then I'll buy a little farm, marry, grow olives. You realize now that every soldier's dream is the same, to trade his sword for silence. Outside, the guard changes again. Footsteps, quiet voices, then stillness. You can almost feel the empire breathing through the fabric of the tent, its pulse steady, unstoppable. Somewhere far away in marble halls and lamplit villas, Men in togas are making decisions that will ripple down to you in the form of orders miles and months from now. You wonder if they ever think about the men who carry their empire on their backs. Probably not. You close your eyes, but sleep comes in fragments. You dream of marching, not of war, not of fear, just endless marching. Boots striking stone banners, flapping the horizon, forever moving, but never closer. You wake briefly disoriented, the image fading like mist. For a second, you're not sure if you ever stopped walking. You roll over and exhale the breath, misting in the cool air. The camp is utterly still now. The stars above seem closer, almost watchful. You think of Rome not as a city, but as an idea. Eternal, they call it. But eternity feels different when you're the one keeping it alive, one day at a time, one heartbeat at a time. Maybe that's the secret no one writes on monuments, that eternity is built from tired men who never got to see it finished. A soft rustle outside, probably a rat. Maybe a god, who knows. You smile faintly at the thought and let your eyelids fall. Your body gives up the last bit of tension and sinks into the earth's quiet rhythm. The shield beside you reflects a sliver of starlight catching your face for just a moment before the darkness swallows it. Somewhere deep in your drifting mind, a voice may be your own. Maybe Rome's whispers, "Rest, soldier. Tomorrow the empire wakes again." And finally you do. So now as the campfire fades and the empire's heartbeat slows, you can close your eyes too. The clang of armor, the shouting, the drills, all melt away, until only the soft wind of some forgotten Roman night remains. You've marched, built, fought, and dreamed enough for one day. Somewhere far beyond the hills, Rome still glows. But here under quiet stars, you've earned peace. Let the world turn without you for a while. Let the legions rest, the dust settle, the torches dim,